Day 2 of coverage here in round number 9. We've got a 4-color Delver deck. Reid is on a mulligan to 6 here with his blue-white-red Miracles deck. So we will see what happens here in round number 9. We've got 8 rounds to cover today, and at the end of that 8th round, we'll have 8 players who will be playing tomorrow.
Reid Duke there, you see on the right, a member of the Channel Fireball Pantheon team. William Cruse with a, was it Manchester City jersey?
You're the soccer guy.
I believe, yeah. Current Premiership champions, Manchester City. Excellent.
It is a Deathrite Shaman to get things started off here. Cruse will sacrifice a fetch land. We'll see what land he wants to get, and he will go with an Underground Sea. It does make you wonder if Duke knows what he's up against here. I imagine that William's got a pretty good idea. If you follow Reid, and it's pretty hard not to, given all the wing that he does. You know that he does play Miracles in Legacy. He did top 8 our Season 2 Invitational playing Miracles as his Legacy deck. So we'll see what Cruse is able to put together in this matchup. Delver versus Miracles is a pretty, pretty standard matchup in Legacy nowadays.
Yeah, well, what I'm going to want to see out of the Delver deck is a diversity of threats early on. What Miracles, so the typical thing for Delver in this matchup is that Miracles arguably plays more removal spells than Delver plays creatures, which can be a really dangerous spot to be in for the Delver player because of all your creatures are likely to not stick on the board, so it's not too hard for Miracles to bridge into the middle game or the late game, and once you get there, the Miracles cards are so much more powerful that it's really hard to come back.
It's a Ponder on turn 2 for Cruse, so he will take a look at a couple of cards here. You see an Underground Sea among them. I believe there's also a young Pyromancer hiding out there. So we will see exactly what he wants to do with this Ponder, if it's time to keep or if it's time to shuffle.
What I do like about this style Delver and the Rug Delver decks just in general, which this I think is probably the most similar to, is that they do have cards like Lightning Bolt to get that extra reach in this matchup, so that if maybe this game slips into the mid game or late game, there still are outs for the Delver player.
Yeah, something that Bug Delver cannot boast. But Bug Delver does have the advantage of having Abrupt Gate to get themselves out from underneath counterbalance. So you do get some trade-offs there.
Right. Looks like he's going to keep to draw Young Pyromancer. That's a play I really like. I think what I like about Young Pyromancer in this matchup is it, in a lot of ways, demands a Terminus from the Miracles player. Otherwise, he's going to have to spend a lot of cards getting rid of all the creatures.
Volcanic Island is the play this turn, and Cruse elects not to attack with the Deathrite Shaman. It feels like he might be up to something here. He does have a fetch land in his graveyard, of course, so even though you guys can barely see it, this isn't by accident, I imagine.
Yeah, it could have been a hard cast Daze. That would be a possibility. But he doesn't want to give away too many free points of damage here. He's definitely on the aggro plan, and it's the kind of aggro plan where you are counting to 20. Every extra point of damage makes the game that much harder for you.
Cruse deploys a Wasteland for his turn. And it looks like it might be time for Young Pyromancer, but we will see, as he is taking his time this turn. Looks like he does want to play. You can see there's a Daze, there's also a Forcible in his hand, and he will go with the Young Pyromancer. So we'll see if this does resolve and what this can put together if it does resolve. And it's in there, so Duke will draw a card. No Terminus to reveal from his draw step. Hasn't done anything yet this game besides just play 2 beautiful lands. Let's make it 3. And now here is a Sensei's Divining Top.
Yeah, that card really is the linchpin to the Miracles deck. I do like the spot that Cruse is in right now, because he's been able to stick these creatures on the board. Now, once again, there's still this danger that Terminus presents out of Reid's deck. It's one of the more, just one of the scary cards for most aggro strategies against Miracles.
An attack here from Young Pyromancer will put Duke down to 18. There's land number 4 for Cruse, and he will pass the turn back. Again, being very conservative with his Deathrite Shaman.
Yeah, so that's 2 points he has opted not to attack in for. So Reid could be at 16 if he'd played it more aggressively. I'm curious as to what he's holding up. At this point, with 5 mana, I guess a hard cast Force of Will is a possibility.
Now, this isn't a situation where I feel like, he's forgetting to attack with Deathrite Shaman. He's making the choice not to attack with it, which, again, I do find to be relatively interesting. And as you mentioned, he is missing points of damage by doing it this way. But he's going to play a Lightning Bolt here on the end of turn. Young Pyromancer will trigger, so an Elemental token is going to come into play. And we'll see if this 3 damage does resolve here.
Right, and this is really just the strength of Young Pyromancer, is it creates a relatively quick clock when it gets to stay on the battlefield.
See if Duke maybe wants to do something here. Again, he's only played a Sensei's Divining Top in lands. He's got spells in his hand.
Yeah, well, right. So Reid hasn't cast anything other than Sensei's Divining Top this turn. But the feeling you get from this game isn't that he's doing it because he has no plays, but it's really because he doesn't feel like Cruse has presented enough of a threat to warrant him responding yet. So now, I think now that Reid is starting to make elementals on Reid's end step, we're going to see Reid start to deploy his answers.
Well, here's the Swords of Plowshares. So it looks like we are going to have some action finally here from Duke. He's been patient. He is at 13. As you saw, Deathrite Shaman remove the Lightning Bolt as well. Deathrite Shaman has more fuel now with that Swords of Plowshares down there. So now Cruse has a decision to make on if maybe he wants to protect the young Pyromancer or just let it go. It's done a little bit of work.
Oh, the advantage to protecting it is he gets 1/1s for every removal spell he plays. Even if he loses this counter war, it's not particularly bad for him.
Cruse giving this a lot of thought. He wants to know how many cards Reid does have, and he's got quite a few, given that he hasn't done very much so far.
Right. I mean, Reid's holdings are a little worrisome for Cruse. So say if Cruse hard casts this Force of Will, Reid could be able to counter spell back with the actual card counter spell and still have a mana to pay for days.
Cruse is going to cast a daze after floating a mana. So another elemental token will come into play here, but that one can't attack just yet. Duke will pay for that with the island, so there goes the daze. And now there goes the young Pyromancer. So Cruse will gain a little bit of life, but Duke will take care of one of the problematic threats on the table.
Yeah, William Cruse had decided really there that it was unlikely that he was going to get full card economy for that daze. Reid with a lot of mana. So instead he just opted to play his daze and cash it into for a 1/1.
An attack for 1 here will put Duke down to 12. Cruse slowly chipping away. Again, has not played a land yet this turn. He's trying to find the best places to pick his spots, kind of bobbing and weaving at this point. Here's a Brainstorm.
Yeah, and again, no swing from Deathrite Shaman here. And we haven't seen it get activated with its black ability either yet. And the Brainstorm pretty good here. It's going to hang on to a Stifle and a Volcanic Island and a Force of Will.
Stifle's a little bit interesting in this situation. There is an Arid Mesa out there that Cruse could go after if Duke tries to sacrifice it. Maybe more interested in trying to counter a miracle effect, be a Terminus or Entreat the Angels, however.
Right, so when Reid, and this is one of the finer points of miracles, is when Reid uses Divining Top to miracle, say, a Terminus, there is actually a trigger that goes onto the stack that then allows Reid to cast Terminus for its miracle cost, and you can target that trigger with Stifle.
After Cruse does set 2 back, he just replays his Volcanic Island. That Duke did know about and passes the turn back. Duke will spin his top. He will untap his 3 lands, and it is time to draw a card. We'll deploy a Flooded Strand and just pass the turn back. Duke's turns are simple. Cruises are anything but, as he activates Deathrite Shaman for a 2nd time this game to remove his Swords to Plowshares. However, Duke will respond with another Swords to Plowshares on that Deathrite Shaman, and again, we will see if Cruse has any interest in trying to protect this. Again, William's been holding on to a Force of Will the entire game. Do you Force of Will the spot removal? Do you Force of Will the Sensei's Divining Top, or do you save it for something larger is the question.
Yeah, that'll drop Reid down to 10, and it looks like he actually has a 3rd Swords to Plowshares in his hand. So right now, we're really seeing the strength the young Pyromancer has brought to the board here. If that Pyromancer were, say, a Tarmogoyf, Reid would already be in the clear here. But because Pyromancer was able to create 3 creatures that Reid had to deal with, he's still taking 2 a turn and is now all the way down to 8.
A 2nd Brainstorm for the game for Cruse. He will draw 3 cards. Again, his first one wasn't perfect, as he did not find a fetch land. Looks like he's found a couple of nice cards here, a couple of Brainstorms and Ponders off of this Brainstorm. So he'll have to figure out again how he wants to set things back on top of his deck and how he wants to move forward from here.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and see exactly what you're mentioning. A lot of cantrips in his hand, no additional threats. So he needs to keep a hand that's pretty reactive, one that has the ability to protect these 2 elementals.
Cruse going to resolve that Brainstorm, pass the turn back over to Duke. Duke is, of course, going to spin his top, get as much information as he can. You see there's Jace the Mind Sculptor among the other cards that are out there. And so Duke is going to set those back. He will sacrifice Arid Mesa and go down to 7 in the process. And Cruse will stifle that. Duke will respond by sacrificing the flooded strand, and Cruse will stifle that.
So a double Stone Rain here from William Cruse. He's kind of finally has turned with his hand of reactive spells and gone pretty aggressive with it.
And those stifles are backbreaking for a couple of reasons. One, Duke doesn't get to shuffle his deck. Two, he misses his land drops. And three, he ends up just taking damage. He's down to 6 now. He's in double bolt range.
He's in double bolt range. It's 3 turns off the elemental tokens. And one thing about Miracles is while the deck is a fairly strong control deck here, it does not have many sources of life gain. Once it gets low, it's just low.
Duke going to try to cast a Jace the Mind Sculptor, and Cruse is going to play his last card, which is Forcible, removing a blue card. That'll take care of that. And you can see Cruse also has that Wasteland out there for the Thunder, so he's in a pretty good spot, but he's got no cards left in his hand. However, he does know what the top card of his deck is, and he will draw it. He'll attack for 2 here, put Duke down to 4.
I believe he left one of his extra cantrips on top of the deck. So if it's a card where he only has one of it in his hand, it's a great card to have.
It looks like it may have been a Ponder. You see a Brainstorm there, a Young Pyromancer, and a Mystery card.
Yeah, I think it's a second Young Pyromancer, actually. So this is a great spot for Cruse. Reid was pretty reactive, and Reid finally tried to turn the corner and play his control cards. William was able to blow for blow. You know, he was able to stifle both fetch lands and Forcible the Jace, and now he has a reload threat here in this Young Pyromancer, and it's going to force Reid to have a Terminus.
Oh. Now here's a Brainstorm from Duke. So 3 cards coming, and 2 cards will have to go back. One thing Reid has not played yet this game is a copy of Terminus. Don't know if he's even been able to find one to put back with the Brainstorm. You can see an Entreat the Angels in his hand. The other white card is a copy of Council's Judgment. So no Terminus here for Duke. And as you mentioned, Cruse is presenting lethal, and he's played a pretty good game so far. Here's another Brainstorm.
Yeah, Reid's gonna Brainstorm 1 deeper. He does find a fetch land here, so he can play a fetch land, pass, and then on William's turn, he can fetch to create a new deck, spin his top, and hope that there's a Terminus on top, but he may be playing to just that. Decide which cards to not see again. Looks like he's going to hang on to the Jace. I think in a world that he finds Terminus, Jace is probably the best follow-up play he could have, as opposed to the cards he got rid of, which were Force of Will and Council's Judgment.
He's going to sacrifice a Scalding Tarn right away. Does not want to get that stifled, of course. And he will search up a land here. We'll see which one it's going to be. Wouldn't be surprised if we're working our way into Tundra territory, but it could also be a Volcanic, but he will go with the non-basic. He's at 3. He's in bolt range, but I think Reid's of the opinion at this point, well, I can't beat Lightning Bolt anyway, so I'm not going to worry about that.
Yeah, like I said, it's hard for him to get out of Lightning Bolt range in this kind of deck. The ways he has to protect himself from getting burned out are, 1, establishing a countertop lock, and 2, I guess if he needs to gain life, he can make an Angel token and Swords to Plowshares it. But that's about it for life gain out of his deck.
Duke will spin, look at the top 3. Again, we don't have a great look at him, neither do you at home. We'll see if he's able to find a copy of Terminus in this situation. Swords to Plowshares will do it too.
Yeah, Swords will buy him a single turn.
See, one of the cards he's looking at is a Counterbalance. He's going to set that back. He will draw a card right now. And there's a Swords. That'll take care of the Young Pyromancer. That, of course, will gain Cruse a little bit of life, but he's not presenting lethal this turn now.
Yeah, Reid's going to drop to 1, which means a lot of his lands are now turned off. Remember, he is a deck that plays a large number of fetch lands because he's a divining top control strategy.
4 strands, 4 Tarns, and 2 copies of Arid Mesa.
Yeah. I want to say more fetches than lands he can find. Almost more fetches than lands he can find.
It's pretty close. It really is. This is a Brainstorm. Cruse may be trying to find that Lightning Bolt to get things over with right now. Don't forget as well, Duke is unable to cast Force of Will for its alternate casting cost as well, since he is at 1.
Yeah, Cruse finds Fetch Land, Force of Will, Young Pyromancer.
Interesting situation here. I can certainly see an argument for taking Young Pyromancer.
Yeah, he may take it and not play it. Right now, he's pretty much forcing Reid to have Terminus just with these 2/1 ones. There's probably no need to put more power on the board, but in the world that Reid does find a Terminus, Young Pyromancer would be a welcome inclusion to his hand.
And Entreat the Angels is turned on now as well. He can make 2 4/4s. So, you know, you're in this really interesting situation on if you should commit more threats to the board or not. You can lose the game by doing so. You could lose the game by not doing so.
Well, we knew the top card of Reid's deck was that Divining Top, because he had to tap it last turn. So he doesn't have to worry about just that blind entreat. And it turns out Reid just doesn't have any miracles on top of the deck.
Nothing to find, and so he will concede the game. William Cruse is going to win game number 1 here over Reid Duke, 4-color Delver. Currently up a game over Blue-White-Red Miracles, which means we will turn our attention to the sideboard, and I will take a look at a Tormod's Crypt, a Grafdigger's Cage, a Rest in Peace, a Red Elemental Blast, 2 copies of Pyroblast, a Blue Elemental Blast, a Spell Pierce, 2 Blood Moons, 2 Vendilion Clicks, a Supreme Verdict, a Baneslayer Angel, and an additional Terminus in Reid Duke's sideboard. Some interesting options here. I wouldn't be surprised to see the additional Terminus come in. I actually kind of like Baneslayer Angel quite a bit as well. I can't imagine Cruse is able to beat that if it gets into play.
Yeah, and this is one of those things that I always think is pretty interesting about Legacy, that if you just play one of these 5-drop creatures with large numbers on it, a lot of decks are really ill-equipped to remove one. So, you know, we see that sometimes in Legacy where people play things like Thrag Tusk even. And I think Baneslayer Angel follows the same principle. There are very few ways in 4-color Delver to get Baneslayer Angel off the table.
You know, Blood Moon is a little bit interesting. I wouldn't be surprised to see Reid board those in as well. Maybe some of these singletons, the blast effects, if you'd like. He's definitely got some good options here. That last game was a well-played one by Cruse. You know, he did a nice job of bobbing and weaving, getting his damage in where he can. And you mentioned it, Young Pyromancer played a big role in that game.
Yeah, couldn't tell you how impressed I was with Young Pyromancer there. Remember, this is a deck, this Delver strategy, where typically the large number 2-drop you see is Tarmogoyf, and Tarmogoyf really wouldn't have been enough in that game. Remember, the original Young Pyromancer was dealt with by Reid, and it was that pair of elemental tokens that ended up dealing up, I think, about 10 points of damage to Reid at the end there.
Has worked his life total away. You have Cruse's sideboard in front of you. What do you see?
All right, well, going to Cruse's sideboard, he has a fair amount of disruption, I think, for control strategies. He does have 2 red blasts, which I would expect him to be using here. In addition to that, he has a Vendilion Click and a Snapcaster Mage that I think both are pretty good here. What he has to worry about is that Reid's ability just to remove all of his relevant creatures. So I think additional threats like V-Click, like Snapcaster Mage are very good. I think Red Blast gives him extra strength in counter wars and lets him really tempo Reid even more. Miracles is a deck that really does rely on its cards like Brainstorm and Ponder to help smooth out its draws. So I think if you play something like Red Elemental Blast in conjunction with Stifles and Wastelands, you can stop Reid from really ever getting the ball rolling with the Miracles strategy.
Well, game 2 will be underway here in just a moment, but we made many announcements yesterday, and I think this is probably your favorite of the bunch. We do have a limited edition playmat coming out here.
Oh, this is just
Star
the
City
best
Games.
one.
Look at this guy.
So this is based loosely off the Wizards promotional art of, what was it, the Mardu Horde for the Khans of Tarkir pre-release. So we took our own spin on it here, and I've always liked Steampunk Penguin, and now he's back, but instead of just flying around in the skies, he's now decided to bring the rest of his tribe with him.
He's got some angry friends.
Yeah.
And
he's got lots of waterfowl.
I wouldn't want any part of these guys.
Look at them. They have killer whales and walruses and
might be a polar bear hiding out in there.
Polar bear.
It gets a little scary. Now, if you guys want to get one of these, you can, of course, come to the Star City Games pre-release at the Star City Games Game Center. Now, I understand that not all of you live in Roanoke. Chances are the majority of our audience does not. But what's kind of cool about this for the first time is that, again, this is a limited edition run. So after we give away these at the pre-release, we're going to be running 600 of these. Anything that we have left that we don't give away at the pre-release will be available for purchase beginning the Monday after the pre-release on Star City Games for $24.99. I know a lot of people are very interested in trying to get one of these. So if you can come to the pre-release at the Star City Games Game Center, you'll be able to get one by playing at events. But if you can't make it to Roanoke to do that, well, you better be on the website Monday morning.
Well, it's a pretty good deal if you're coming to the store for the events. So this playmat on the site sells for $25, and it just happens that the entrance fee to a flight is also $25. So you are basically getting a free release. So with any luck, we'll have quite a few of these available. Now, you can subtract one from whatever we do have available because Matthias will be getting one. You can count on that. It's a rate. You know, I'm getting one just like everyone else, though. It's just that, you know, I'll be up on Monday morning.
Yeah.
When these go on the website. Yeah.
So definitely check out StarCityGames.com after the pre-release, or you can find out more information about the pre-release at the Game Center at StarCityGames.com/pre-release. Again, the pre-release is taking place for Console Talk here September 20th and the 21st. As we do head back over to our match, these players have begun. Duke with just a flooded Strand. Cruse will be sacrificing a fetch land of his own. We'll see what land he wants to search up and what he wants to deploy on the first turn of the game, be it a cantrip or maybe a Deathrite Shaman.
Well, so Reid on a 6-card hand this time, and with the first couple turns of the game, you always have to wonder, you have to make sure that the Miracles player is going to get to play. Remember, there's a lot of weapons like Stifle, Wasteland that you see out of a Delver deck. And it looks like Cruse out of the sideboard, he has 4 Cabal therapies in his board. That's typically something I'd expect for a combo matchup, but he likes it also against control.
Yeah, Cabal Therapy gets a little interesting, and now it looks real good. You can see Duke's hand. He's got a Blue Elemental Blast, 2 Cops of Terminus, a Swords of Plowshares, and then 2 Tundras. So Cruse will get the information, as I imagine he missed on this first shot. We'll find out what Cruse did name with this Cabal Therapy on the first go.
Yeah, my guess would be something like Counterbalance. That's the kind of turn 2 play that could really wreck him if Reid just slammed one. I think what's more impressive is I love the interaction between Cabal Therapy and Young Pyromancer in this deck. That's really a strong one.
Duke will play a Tundra and just pass the turn back.
Yeah, it looks like there may be
Cruse.
a second Cabal Therapy in his hand, and this one's going to hit double.
And Cruse did name Counterbalance with that first therapy. Now, if you're Cruse, you are really hoping that Reid did not draw the card Brainstorm.
Absolutely.
That's the one thing you're hoping for, and if he didn't, you are doing quite well for yourself. Now, Cruse does have a Delver of Secrets in his hand. You can also see the Volcanic Island there as well. So now he's just trying to figure out, okay, how do I want to lead out here? He's going to go with a therapy and hope that Duke did not draw a Brainstorm.
Yeah, Brainstorm or Spell Pierce. There's a couple ways that Reid could interact here, but if Reid doesn't have any of them, he will certainly lose a card. If Williams' plan is to play Delver, he may actually take the Swords to Plowshares before he takes the pair of Terminus.
You see William is consulting his pad where he's got those cards written down. Again, he knows about 2 Terminus, Red Elemental Blast, excuse me, Blue Elemental Blast. Normally it's red, but it's blue this go around. Swords to Plowshares as well. Mystery card was drawn for the turn. Cruse doesn't know what that is just yet. And Cruse is just trying to figure out, okay, what's the worst case for me here? Do I take his Swords? Do I just nail both copies of Terminus? Terminus in your hand isn't really all that scary, though he does have the ability to put them back. So he will name Terminus, and Duke's draw for the turn was just a boring old mountain. That's it.
What it might mean is, it depends on how many creatures are in Williams' hand, but remember, 2 therapies in the graveyard means that there's a lot more of them to come. He looks like he does have Young Pyromancer in his hand, so he wants a way to draw out that Blue Blast. With these therapies, that Young Pyromancer can do a lot of work. But Reid does actually still have has 2 answers to Pyromancer in his hand in both Swords to Plowshares and Blue Elemental Blast.
Cruse is considering a Wasteland this turn, but he's going to go with the Volcanic and just pass the turn back over to Duke. Duke will draw a card. Didn't get a great look at it, but again, we do know he's got a Mountain, he's got a Swords, he's got a Blue Blast over there. He will deploy the last card that we did know, which was a Tundra, before passing the turn back over to Cruse, who will draw. Looks like it was a copy of Red Elemental Blast, so now things are getting interesting.
So now both Red and Blue Blasts in his hand.
You saw Cruse kind of scratch off a card on the list of cards that he knows, as Duke did play his Tundra last turn. So again, William is working with very good information. He knows about a Mountain, a Blue Elemental Blast, and a Swords of Plowshares. 1 card in Duke's hand, currently a mystery, as Cruse deploys his 3rd land, which is a Wasteland.
Yeah, and the remaining cards in Cruse's hand look to be Pyromancer, Delver, Lightning Bolt, Red Elemental Blast, and another Lightning Bolt.
Okay.
So if he can set up a board where this Young Pyromancer gets to live, and he can untap with more red mana, he can go to town with it. I think what that tells me is I think he's waiting to have a second red source before deploying Young Pyromancer.
Yeah. Swords of Plowshares will get the Delver of Secrets off of the table. Cruse will gain a little bit of life from that, but that takes away one of the answers for Young Pyromancer, which is what Cruse is trying to set up. Duke will draw a card.
Yeah. Cruse wants to get this going quickly because right now they're doing, Cruse is trading his creatures for Reid's removal spells, which really is playing into Reid's game plan more than it's playing into Cruse's. The longer he waits, remember, all it takes from Reid to set this up is a top deck Sensei's Divining Top, and suddenly you're going to feel like Reid's really far ahead here.
Duke did play a copy of Flooded Strand. Again, we know he has Mountain in his hand, but he elected not to play that one, so giving away a little bit of information. But if he's giving it away, I imagine he's doing it willingly.
Yeah, I think he wants the uncracked fetch lands in play. He's setting up for that turn when he does top deck a Divining Top.
It's a Brainstorm here for Cruse. So 1, 2, and 3 cards are drawn. He'll have to put 2 of those back. Again, he's likely looking for a fetch land so he can make it a perfect Brainstorm while also finding a second red source. But it looks like this is going to get a little more difficult because I don't believe he has found a land.
Yeah, I don't think he found the land. There is some advantage here. I think he found a second copy of Young Pyromancer. So rather than finding the double red to protect the Pyromancer, he may just run out Young Pyromancers in succession and challenge Reid to have kill spell for each of them. Right now, the only kill spell that we know Reid has is Blue Elemental Blast.
Cruse is just going to pass the turn back here. And I believe the reason for that, again, is because he is valuing this Red Elemental Blast very highly.
Yeah,
a Scalding Tarn.
I don't dislike setting up for the counter war in general. Because he doesn't have another red coming up in the next 2 draws, I feel like he may have to pull the trigger. Turns out, though, he has a Ponder on this draw, so he has another shot at just finding that land.
I think he found it on the last card there, I believe, is a Scalding Tarn.
Right, so now he can find the second red, and so now it's not, instead of having 2 Pyromancers and just running them out, he has 2 Pyromancers and a Red Blast to back them up. That means there has to be 3 answers to a red card in Reid's hand, which is 2 more than he had last time William looked. It's very likely that he's going to get to keep one of the Pyromancers.
So there's a Scalding Tarn, and he will just pass the turn back. Cruse demonstrating a lot of patience.
Yeah, this is a scary situation to be in for the Delver player. You're giving the Miracles player a lot of turns to draw Brainstorm or Sensei's Divining Top, all of which would be are scary places to be for the Delver player when your opponent's still at 20.
Duke plays that Mountain that we've known about for some time. That was land number 6. Cruse just draws and I believe passes the turn back again, demonstrating a lot of patience here. You can tell he's setting something up.
I like playing control decks. I like waiting, and I don't know if I have this kind of patience. There are cards, not just the Brainstorms and the Divining Tops, but say, Reid does play cards like Entreat the Angels, which would be pretty nice here too. Cruse doesn't have a counter spell for just a simple Miracle Entreat.
Well, this will help break serve a little bit. This will actually finally get our action going. This is a Vendilion Click. And now Duke has to make decisions on what he wants to do. Again, we know he has a Blue Elemental Blast in his hand. The rest of the cards right now are a mystery.
Well, this hits double, because not only does it get to take a card out of Reid's hand, in another one of those answers, but it gives Cruse a look at Reid's hand. And remember, he has a pair of Therapies in the yard.
Duke is going to respond with a Brainstorm.
Yeah, speaking of patience.
Yep.
Reid had a hand with no real action in it, 6 lands in play, and apparently had a Brainstorm for a while, and opted to do nothing. So Cruse not the only really patient player at the table here.
If you're going to do nothing, I'll do nothing too. We'll have a nothing off.
I'd be very tempted to Brainstorm and try to find a Divining Top and get one down in that situation. But I suppose Reid has it right. When he Brainstorms, and he'll get to Brainstorm, maybe he'll find a Divining Top at that point, and he can put it on top of his deck, protect it from Therapy, then get one down, and, reach the same spot, but have more flexibility.
So Duke does put back a couple of cards with the Brainstorm. Very patient here as he does sacrifice the Scalding Tarn, so he will go down to 19. Wondering if that will resolve, as he does have to worry about Stifle. It was very good in the last game for Cruse, but that is good to go. So Duke is going to search up a land here. And it looks like he's going to go maybe with a basic island, and the answer is yes.
Remember, there is a Red Blast in Cruse's hand, so he does have that available. He's still got to be a little concerned. Reid does play Entreat the Angels, and that's always like just a clock waiting to happen.
He hasn't been doing a click of his own. Well, okay then.
How nice is this? And he also has the Blue Elemental Blast mana up.
For the Red Elemental Blast. Boy, is this getting interesting.
It is. Harkens back to alpha.
I suppose this is how it was meant to be played.
Right? If I have my red blast, then you have your blue blast, because red and blue are mortal enemies.
Yep. So now let's see what Cruse wants to do. I can't imagine he was expecting this.
No, things have gotten really complicated for him.
Cruse is going to sacrifice the Scalding Tarn. He'll go down to 19. We'll see what land he wants to search up now. It's a volcanic island. And maybe he will be casting his red elemental blast on the Vendilion Click, knowing that it will get blue blasted, but that'll clear the way for other things.
Well, Reid did brainstorm and shuffle away, so if you're Cruse, you expect this to get blue blasted, but you're not positive that it's going to get blasted. There's an argument, if you're Cruse, to just letting Reid V-click you. You do have 2 young Pyromancers, so he only gets 1 of them. But also, I think hiding information is probably important enough to make this counter war happen.
There's the blue blast. What's also interesting about all of these exchanges is that, you know, for Cruse, he's going to lose this exchange, it looks like. But he does take care of 2 fetch lands, what makes tops a little bit worse over the course of the game. The brainstorm's, you know, a little bit worse because there are less fetch lands here for Reid that are in play at this point.
Well, there is a worry here, and if this happens, I'm just going to give Reid mad props here, is that by baiting out this counter war, there's a chance that when Cruse's Vendilion Click trigger finally resolves, it's going to see a pair of lands in Reid's hand and not get to do anything.
I would not be surprised.
If Reid had set up the game to do that, you just have to think, you know, well played, sir, right?
So here's the hand that Duke gets to look at. A Surgical Extraction, 2 copies Young Pyromancer, and a Lightning Bolt. Those are the options here for Duke. He will record that information, and we'll see if he selects anything, because again, he does have the option to take nothing.
Yeah, I'm going to guess he'll take a Young Pyromancer. That card, we saw how good it can be in this matchup last game. This is not something that Reid's particularly happy to see. This is a lot of gas on his side. Surgical Extraction, an interesting choice for Cruse. It's always one of those cards that's a little bit on a razor's edge as to how good it is in a matchup.
I do find Surgical's inclusion a little bit interesting, but if you think about it, a lot of players who play Miracles do have access to some number of Snapcaster Mages, and that can really blow that strategy up. So, you know, you're playing a little bit of game inside the game there at that point. One, he's not working with perfect information on what Reid's deck list is. And 2, you might be thinking, oh, maybe I can get him. When a Lightning Bolt's going to go to the bottom here, and so Cruse is going to draw a mystery card, and he'll pick up those 2 Young Pyromancers and the Surgical. And now Cruse will resolve. He's going to look at a Blood Moon and a Chase.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Blood Moon is horrifying if you're Cruse. He cannot operate underneath that, really. No, you know, he does have Young Pyromancer in his deck.
His whole hand is red right now. So I guess it's not an immediate threat, but it certainly gives Reid the better late game.
So now Cruse has to make a decision, and he says, I think he just said you can keep him. Okie dokie.
Remember, this was all on Reid's end step, so we're going to get, Cruse will get 1 untap here. And letting his opponent keep a Jace on this board is, I'm impressed with.
A Jace and a Blood Moon.
Yeah.
Saying you can have both of those cards.
Well, if I was planning to play a ton of creatures out, maybe Blood Moon's fine. I mean, I'm not happy about it, but it might be that Cruse just has nothing he can do about it.
Gitaxian Probe now with the 2 triggers from Pyromancer. Now, here's the thing, right? He knows the grip. He knows that he can deploy because Reid shuffled his deck. So, in theory, Terminus, we don't know if it's there.
Cruse can Surgical the Terminus if he's worried about Reid miracling it.
True.
Now,
that's
Reid,
adorable.
Reid does have 1 Supreme Verdict in his sideboard, so he does still have an out here, but...
And this also makes sense of, he's got 2 therapies in his graveyard, so he says, you know what?
Everything.
I can just take everything, and I get to trigger my Young Pyromancers as well. So I sacrifice a token, make 2 more, take your Blood Moon or your Jace. So there goes Blood Moon.
And take the other one.
Take the other one. Up another token.
And are we going to see then Surgical Terminus just for the kicker?
It's hard to pass up on that at this point.
It certainly makes it makes so many elementals that it makes Reid's clock it makes the clock very short. It takes away a lot of Reid's outs.
Here's an attack. There's an immediate trade.
Now, actually, what he can do with the surgicals, because there's a miracle trigger for Terminus, is he can, if Reid decides to reveal Terminus to the miracle trigger, he can surgical it then. So he doesn't have to make that play yet. If there is 6, once Reid gets 6 lands in play though, then William Cruse may have to do that, because if Reid just draws Terminus, doesn't miracle it, and then just casts it, then Cruse has lost his opportunity to surgical.
Duke draws his card for the turn. It's not a miracle. Not quite sure what it is, but the player on the left turn, William Cruse, is in the driver's seat in this game right now. And you talked about it right at the top of the match. You like young Pyromancer a whole lot more than Tarmogoyf in this matchup, and it's looking very, very good.
It has been beyond good here. And we see during Reid's draw step, Cruse is going to fire off that surgical extraction. And he's actually hitting Brainstorm, not Terminus.
Okay. And Island was the draw there for Duke. 2 more elemental tokens are going to come into play. The clock is a quick one.
So right now we have 6 elementals and 2 young Pyromancers. That's 10 damage a turn. That is a 2-turn clock. Reid will only get 1 more draw.
Brainstorm is the weapon of choice. See, Cruse wants to make sure he gets them all. He almost missed Storm there. But there are the 3 Brainstorms, and more importantly here for Cruse, he gets to get information. He just went by a Baneslayer Angel.
Yeah, Baneslayer.
In case we play a 3rd game.
So what are the outs? Supreme Verdict, Baneslayer Angel, and Terminus.
Entreat's not bad.
Entreat. So he has 2 Entreats, 2 Terminus, 1 Baneslayer, 1 Verdict. So Reid is on a 6-outer.
Top gives him redraws.
Right, top gives him redraws.
I mean, there are a bevy of misses, and there are definitely some hits. If you're Cruse, you're looking to draw, like a Force of Will, something like that. Just some sort of hard permission spells. He does attack here for a bunch of damage. It'll be 10. I believe it's going to put Duke down to 8, pass the turn back, and hope that Duke doesn't spike on him.
Reid not a favorite to spike, but it's not as long of odds as you might think.
Hey, as long as he has outs. Now, Entreat has just been shut off because he's going after that Tundra.
All right, so that takes away 2 of the outs. So now Reid down to 4 outs with some redraws.
Duke going to sacrifice his Flooded Strand. See if it'll be a basic Plains. Looks like it will be. He's at 7 now, facing lethal next turn. Supreme Verdict gone now is an out as well.
You're right.
Yep, only 1 Plains.
So it's just the pair of Terminus, and Baneslayer's out.
Baneslayer's off now too, so it's 2
just
copies of Terminus, and then top is a redraw.
Yeah, 2 outs with redraws.
Yeah.
Getting rid of that second white, a bigger play than one might think at first.
Duke draws and extends the hand. William Cruse is going to win this match over one of the very best players in the world, Reid Duke, and he is our lone undefeated player here in our Season 3 Invitational. He is 9-0.
Yeah, right now 5-0 with 4-color Delver. This deck, we've seen a bit of it, and I have to like it in the metagame that we have today. I have always, Rug Delver has certainly been one of Legacy's top decks, and I don't really think that changes at all. But in a format where people are playing a lot of Charlotte's Bug, a lot of Miracles,